Hello, Stay. Let's begin today's episode with an allegory. Among a certain set of people, it is a very well-known allegory, but you probably, have not heard it before. It goes like this. You're walking close to a river, and you see that there seems to be some kind of fuss. There's lots of people. They're moving in and out of the river, doing all kinds of things at the side of it. There's this huge crowd. Moving closer, you see that all these people are swimming into the river and then making these systems of chains and arms and hands, moving something from one person to another. Infants. They're pulling infants from the river. You approach closer, vaguely, mindlessly helping towel off some of the freezing children. You watch and you stay there for a while. It's hectic. Everything is so urgent. After all, there's all of these infants coming downstream. One person in the river gets tired and you swap out for them. It's difficult and rough work. You have to balance in the river while holding someone else's outstretched arm while trying to catch an infant. But surely you assume this will be temporary. After all, there aren't just constantly infants in the stream. And yet hours go by. You swap shifts, and then again, and then again. Days, weeks. Eventually you're back to the first shift you started in. Since then, some people have left the river for good, but others have also joined. There's still babies in the river. Eventually, you look around and you blink and you shake your head and you say, I'm going to go upstream. And half of the eyes look at you. Why? Asks someone who has been at this river for years now, who has built a home and a fire at this river. Well, you say, shouldn't we figure out why there's always all these babies in the river? Someone else shrugs, not even looking at you.
That's just the way it is. Sometimes babies come from the river. That's how it's always been.
This makes no sense to you. Babies aren't born from rushing tides, and there certainly aren't thousands of people giving birth to babies in rivers miles upstream. Somewhere, you're certain, there have to be reasons that there are all these babies in this river. And even if half the people down here don't get it, don't believe that it's useful to risk these children's lives right now to hike upstream, some of them also agree. There's a child here, a child saved from the river 10 years ago. And they hand you a pack of meats and cheeses as you get ready to go.
When I'm older,
she says,
I'm going to come help you if there's still babies down here. But until I'm old enough, I'll be grateful if there's even one less baby down here every year. And if there is, I'll know you got upstream safely.
And then you begin to hike, hoping that when you get to a place with answers, you have the energy to take the next action towards the next question, to the answers after that. Stay, my name is Lullaby, and welcome to Stray Kids the Megaverse, a podcast about 8 people who are definitely real people, and who maybe we even sometimes know what those people are like, if we're very lucky. Today's Stray Kids song is Social Path, a song that is their own meta-analysis of themselves. Today I'm going to be introducing the last of our 4 pillars of meta-analysis of Stray Kids entertainment, of the meta Stray Kids megaverse. And that pillar is what I've been referring to as the state of the meta. Hi, Stay, lullaby of the future here. I just wanted to quickly highly recommend that you do take a look at the content warnings for this episode. While the front half is pretty academic and straightforward, the back half of it, after we start discussing reality television, becomes quite dark, actually. So I've split the content warnings into segments of time, approximately, knowing that, this intro will add a little bit of that, but I've put in content warnings based on the sections of time that they come up in. Please do take a look at that in the episode description. And while I always recommend that people push themselves towards growth, don't push yourself to the point of anguish if any of those things are triggering. Utilize my silly tea and nacho breaks to take some breaks for yourself. This episode is a marathon, not a sprint. Future episodes will be more fun. This one is rough, though. That's all. Back to the show. I spoke in the introduction, episode 0.5, I guess, about the idea of meta, definitionally. But what I didn't get into is why I actually refer to it as the state of the meta. It's mostly a fun little Easter egg reference. I personally have my Bachelor of Fine Arts in Game Design and Development, and the first company I worked at was actually an online game company. A game I and many people I know play a lot of. Actually, a few years back, made blog posts titled The State of the Meta. And that's because in online game communities, we will often discuss the question of, hey, what's the current state of the meta? So in games, the meta is the high-level view of how the overlapping game mechanics interact with each other to both maintain balance while creating interesting and unique ways to make both an individual character build and then also create a group, like a team or a dungeon or a raid build collectively. So in MOBAs like Overwatch or League, the meta is going to refer to which characters and or equipment are particularly powerful or weak in any given version compared to others. And then also how the team composition is going to often become more than the sum of its parts, which is to say that, one character might seem particularly weak mechanically compared to another, but with the right team composition, they're actually quite strong. Or perhaps there are certain circumstances where they become quite powerful, such as if they're countering a tactic or strategy or character or equipment used by another team. This theory works out similarly in pretty much any online content, online game content, though the more complex the game environment, the more nuanced our understanding of the meta becomes. So in MMOs, which are incredibly complex and have, both cooperative elements and player v player elements, small group content, large group content, single player content, etc., the quote-unquote meta can become very analysis-driven, very number-crunchy, and often comes with a not insignificant amount of bitching, honestly. Bitching from players, bitching from devs, from the poor player community teams who have to deal with everyone bitching at them. You know, it's often just a lot of people being super fucking unchill. We're already to tea time. Casual players of games usually don't really have to care about the meta. The meta is something that can be easily ignored by a lot of players often, but that's not the case in real life. However, people really, really like to pretend it is. And ultimately, it's not that it doesn't matter to them in games either, because when a single player who doesn't really care about the meta suddenly discovers that the next version, the thing they've gotten used to, is changing and they don't know why, well, now they're the ones bitching. Sorry, social media team. So what is the meta in real life? Well, it's just the same thing. It's overlapping systems creating complex realities. It's number crunching. It's figuring out what the current balance of the real world is. So regardless of whether it's in games or real life, we can't really escape the meta. Certainly not permanently. And in real life, trying to ignore the meta doesn't just result in minor frustrations and surprises. It can truly be life and death. The allegory I told earlier, it's, in my opinion, quite inelegant, but it's based on a classic metaphor that almost any social worker likely knows in a much shorter version. Talking to social workers, it's pretty easy to sort of use babies in the river as a shorthand because this is just such a ubiquitous metaphor. Not just social workers, but like caseworkers or people who work at community level services very often will know the babies in the river metaphor. Therapists come in many forms. There are psychologists, marriage and family counselors, professional mental health counselors, clinical social workers, and other more niche mental health professionals as well. The babies in the river metaphor tends to be more focused towards how clinical social workers, which is what I am, approach the therapeutic practice. While clinical social workers, distinct from non-clinical social workers, tend to work in individual or group counseling, we still focus on what we call the person in environment perspective and hold an understanding of what we refer to as the micro-macro divide. I'm saying all this to explain what I mean, both by what the real life meta is and why it is we can't escape it. So, the person in environment perspective is that people are all sort of outcomes of the environments they live in. The nature versus nurture question, we actually have a lot of answers to, and a lot of the answers are mostly nurture, at least as far as personality and behaviors are concerned. Obviously, there's a lot of things that do exist from birth, but many of them don't. We know that babies have some basic temperaments. So like you might have a slightly happier baby. You might have a slightly more fussy baby. But there's a lot of change that happens very, very early on. And then there's obviously some just physical differences that will affect some parts of personality and behavior. So, for instance, autism is a innate neurodivergence. ADHD is an innate neurodivergence. There's some other things as well that we believe are innate neurodivergences that are like from birth, lifelong. That's just like how the brain is going to function. And some of these things are going to be true as well for hormone systems, right? Things like that all have impact, of course, on personality and behavior. But as far as sort of this idea of like, is good and bad created or come from birth? Like, no, we have absolutely no evidence to believe that, psychopathy is something that like somebody's born with. So, a lot of the answer is nurture. And when we say nurture, we mean also environmental. I primarily work with autistic queer adults, often racialized, often from polyamorous backgrounds, but not necessarily always. So I know that they have series of circumstances and marginalization that leads them to experience things in certain ways. And that also has led to them being at a certain point in their life. I know that some people, their ongoing dysregulation is going to be due to ongoing, not having enough money. So my clients who make enough money to be able to not spend all of their time in financial distress, to be able to go out with friends sometimes, to be able to buy things that are appropriate accommodations for them, because being autistic and ADHD is fucking expensive. Those clients are going to be much more emotionally regulated. Just like, period, end of story. And they're going to have a lot more opportunity to tackle trauma because they're going to be emotionally regulated earlier on in the therapeutic process to process that trauma. I'm pouring tea. Oh my gosh. I might take out the tea segments this time around because I'm very tired. I'm also awake. I don't know what I am. It's 5:45 and pitch blackout, okay? That's what I am. It's 5:45 and pitch blackout. And so I don't know that I have like interesting vibes for tea time. I guess I could just shut the fuck up and not talk nonstop. That'd be weird though. I don't know. That'd stress me out. No, it wouldn't. It might stress you out though. People don't like silence on podcasts, just slow sipping sound. So that's the person and environment perspective. And when we talk about the micro-macro divide, we're sort of referring to something similar. We sort of conceptualize 3 layers. Personally, I don't think 3 is enough, but we conceptualize 3 layers of group organization, I guess. So the micro is like one person, maybe 2 people, right? This is like your own personal self and life. One of the biggest issues with Western therapy practices that people complain the most about is that so much of them is based on micro level work. Meso is community level. So we're talking maybe like if you're working in a residential home, you're working at a meso level. If you're working with community activists, you're working at a meso level. Meso level is usually like either hyper local or, whatever the level your local elections happen on. Macro is everything bigger, including internationally. this is why I say I don't think there's enough levels. But one of the fundamental premises of being a social worker is that you are always working on all of these levels. And so the whole concept of like the personal is the political, which kind of goes back to 60s feminist movements, but also really heavily involved in civil rights movements. You know, if you know the word intersectionality, you might know that it originated from Kimberly Crenshaw, but her work was based on the Combahee River Collective of the 1970s, which was a group of Black lesbians who talked a lot about how being Black queer women uniquely affected them, and they really weren't able to work effectively with people who weren't Black queer women, because those people were really missing incredibly important pivotal parts of the work due to not understanding the unique political situation they were in. So the personal is the political is the understanding, is the reflection that at all times we are pretty much always working at all levels, at micro, meso, and macro level. And especially if you're working at macro level, so part of working across the micro-macro divide is aimed towards, you know, social workers who are going to focus more on like policy, legislation, things like that. And them needing to understand that like micro experiences are what's important when you're doing macro work. Macro work isn't meaningful if it doesn't actually help people in their lives. So personally, my primary theoretical orientation as a clinical social worker is that of what we call a rights-based social worker. What that means is that it's my personal belief that when people have their human rights fulfilled, they are able to make the best decisions for them and their communities, and that the vast majority of people, when their rights are fulfilled, are fundamentally social creatures who will work to take care of their communities when they're making the best decisions for themselves. We see this just consistently being the case. I could bring up so much research that shows us that this is the case, that like people usually work really hard to take care of each other. That's not what this episode is about. This is an introduction, but like I'm gonna need you to just trust me that, yeah, when we make sure that people are actually getting their rights met, and we'll talk a little bit more about what that means, they make pro-social decisions, usually. Certainly, frequently enough that it would be a better situation than what we have right now. More tea. I'm going to use this tea time. Oh my gosh, how am I already out of... I was drinking tea while doing some research before this. That's my problem. During this tea time, I'm just going to assure you that this will come back to K-pop. I promise. But, you know, the whole point of this is that we need some collective context and understanding before we talk about K-pop. Oh, it's almost like I talk too much or something. It's like I have too many thoughts. It's almost like I'm autistic. All right. If you don't know anything about human rights on an international level, so let's say all you know about them, for example, if you're an American, is like the Bill of Rights or whatever your country's idea of human rights are. If that's all you know about human rights, I highly recommend that you go take a look at internationally defined human rights from the United Nations. The UN has a lot of human rights documents, and there's some really, really important ones that are currently in progress, so they're not reflected in any of the current covenants, particularly around environmental rights, though it's acknowledged that we do need environmental rights incorporated into those covenants. But a good first place to start is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It's sort of our base document that other rights documents and covenants are pulled from. You will likely be surprised by many of them. For instance, the right to a reasonable number of working hours, or perhaps the right to engage with the arts and sciences of your community. Anytime someone brings up healthcare isn't a human right, I literally laugh and then link them to the article that says that healthcare is a human fucking right. It's noted multiple times. One time a client, I was talking about, being rights-based, and they thought they were joking, and they went, well, okay, but is it a human right to have, like, friends? And the answer is, like, kind of yes, actually. It's not stated exactly like that, but there's enough community-oriented rights in there that it's certainly a human right to have access to make meaningful connections. Again, not in those exact words, but that's essentially what it is. Yeah, there's a lot of great information out there about human rights. And, when people disparage the UN, there's actually important work that does get done in the UN. And the Human Rights Commission is a huge part of that. If you're ever trying to figure out, for instance, what age-appropriate sex education is, the UN has, like, sex education considered a human right, just like internet access is considered a human right now, and has recommendations on age-appropriate sex education based on that human right. So it's some interesting stuff. When human rights are inflicted on, though, they often inflict on several other rights. We call human rights interconnected. So they're interconnected, interdependent, and I can't remember. I usually remember this word. I can't. Inalienable. Everybody has the right to their human rights. It doesn't get taken away from you. They can't be prioritized against each other because they are interconnected. For example, people will always ask me, like, how do you determine what a reasonable number of working hours is? And the answer is the number that doesn't inflict on other human rights. So we know that if your rights to a reasonable number of working hours are inflicted on, then so are your rights to health and safety, your rights to engage with community, your rights to be part of a union potentially if you don't have time to organize a union. I think the study was done in Australia. There's been a lot of studies around health and working hours. I won't get too far into this right now. There's probably a State of the Meta episode on this. My focus before I began doing clinical work when I was still working in tech was in workplace, like, analysis and workplace culture. So I know a lot about this. There's been a lot of studies done on working hours' impact on health. There was a really, really big one that came out of Australia a handful of years ago, maybe like 6 years ago, that showed that for men, I believe it was 38 or 39 hours of work a week was the maximum before it became a detriment to health. But for women, and I don't believe that they were really looking at gender identity much. I believe that they were just, like, looking at cis men and cis women, at least as far as the study was aware. But for women, it went down to, I think, the mid-20s. It's like 25, 26 hours a week because of the amount of unpaid labor that they're expected to do outside of work. That's a lot lower than people think it is. That's how much work is actually reasonable. We think about game balance again. It's just like balancing a game. Every time there's a shift in rights being fulfilled or impacted, every time there's a shift in whether your rights are met or whether they're inflicted on, it can have an impact, sometimes a major impact, on multiple other parts of the system, on multiple other rights. So our political systems impact every parts of our lives because we're reliant on each other to ensure our rights can be met. And political systems are a primary method that we use to try to have that reliance. That's not to say anything about how effective those systems are, but the ostensible point of them is to be the systems that support us in getting those rights met. Like, what is the purpose of government if not to ensure that its populace has its rights met? Again, I'm not saying that that's how it actually works in reality, but I would love to hear an argument that government exists, ostensibly, for that there is a good other purpose to government, that there is another pro-social purpose to government besides ensuring that its population has its rights met. So if you live in the EU, part of the reason that you have some of the highest standards for accessibility in media, for instance, or some of the reasons that you're going to be more likely to have better labor rights, etc., in order to be part of the EU, a country has to ratify and work towards all of the UN human rights documents and covenants. Now, countries make petitions all the time for exceptions, things like that. But again, your day-to-day life is immediately and directly impacted because in the 50s, a number of people from a number of systems came together to totally change the state of the meta. And the system that you're living in, the political system that you're living in, has better guardrails to try to ensure rights for its populace. Again, not saying it's super effective, but it has more guardrails in place for that than other systems do. The United States is accountable to fuck all for its citizens having human rights, So, as a clinical social worker with a focus on autistic adults, I spend a significant amount of my work and time with clients addressing and understanding community, regional, national, and sometimes even international systems. Most of the clients I work with spend a lot of time navigating a highly ableist, classist, racist medical system. We need to explore effective ways to navigate all that. And sometimes that requires knowledge from me that moves more into case management rather than just individual personal skills. I have to have an understanding of racial biasing and diagnostics in the mental health system. I have to understand options in my local and regional community for my clients to find support networks and friendships among other marginalized people. I spend a lot of time in sessions Googling. All my clients know this. My clients bring something up. I'm very good at Googling. I have some context they don't have. We spend time doing research. That is working across the micro-macro divide. Okay. All right. We are at hold on, I need to figure out how long. We're at minute 35. Cool. It'll be a little bit less than that by the time I edit. We're at minute 35 and we can finally get to K-pop. Oh, someone slapped me. So we understand from an overarching point of view that in order to understand complexities of daily life, we need to navigate higher systems. And now we can talk about K-pop because now we understand what I mean by the state of the meta, which is, what are the fucking systems doing? What are the cogs cogging? What are the wheels turning? And fucking why? I've brought up in past episodes several state of the meta conversations that will need to happen. I will admit, I personally wavered back and forth on the most important fundamental topics for this introduction episode. Obviously, I guess the most important fundamental topic that I decided on was a bunch of stuff that had nothing to do with K-pop and just like making sure we're all on the same page about what I mean by the meta. But the more K-pop related fundamental topics, because much like human rights are interdependent and interconnected, it's hard to say that any particular like philosophical topic or historical topic or cultural topic, etc., are our most pivotal underpinning. But after thinking it through, and I think I mentioned this last episode, I did eventually decide, if y'all didn't care at all about systems and you walked away from State of the Meta episodes altogether after only listening to this episode, which that's probably not the case because you've already listened to me talk about systems for 30 minutes, but the system that I would think would be the most valuable to you to be thinking about when consuming Stray Kids content is the system of reality television, or reality entertainment media. How does reality television work? How is it similar and different to the media that Stray Kids and other K-pop stars put out? And how does it impact us as consumers? Oh, more tea. My hand is also getting tired. You see, my microphone stand broke. My microphone stand broke. And so I'm just holding my mic. I'm doing great. Oh, we're all doing great. Why don't I have cough drops in here? I used to. I talk for 6 hours a day. I really should fucking have cough drops in. Okay. First, we're going to define reality television. The only major criteria for what reality television is that it is purportedly unscripted and shows quote-unquote real-life situations, which just means that the people on the show are themselves in the situation being shown, rather than playing as someone else who has been scripted in those situations. Reality TV as a genre became popularized in the 90s, gaining popularity in the early 2000s, especially in the United States and like UK and some other heavy media countries, I guess at the time. There's a word that I'm looking for that I don't remember. However, reality TV has its earliest roots in Nazi Germany, which surprises me not at all. Our first major example of reality TV was propaganda, and that makes sense because reality TV has proven to be highly influential on the mindsets and beliefs of individuals who consume it. It is super useful for propaganda. Also, you would be shocked at the number of things in this universe that have their roots in Nazism, eugenics, and genocide. I think everyone's favorite one is MBTI. I know you might be surprised to hear this, but MBTI was made by someone who was pro-eugenics. So that's fun. Back to reality TV. But it wasn't until the 90s that reality TV really got its feet under it, and it was primarily because of money. Reality TV allowed networks to create content with minimal script writing without paying for professional actors, which made it a lot easier to get shows greenlit because they didn't have to spend all this money on it. And then, as it turned out, the profit margins were fantastic. It starts with The Real World, Survivor, America's Next Top Model, Big Brother, The Bachelor. By 2013, the average profit margin for reality television was 40%. And these weren't famous people. These were just people doing things. Reality TV has gotten massive. By 2019, scripted series accounted for only 24% of the 25 highest rated original series on cable, per Hollywood Reporter. Something interesting to note, in Q3, the operating profit margin of JYPE was reported at nearly 30%. The gross profit margin, I believe, was over 50%. So I unfortunately could not find the information on operating profit margin for one label, formerly known as Division 1 specifically. Q3, it might have been iffy. I wish that I could see sort of the year over year and quarterly breakdowns on that level, but unfortunately I can't. I would be super curious to see, for our biggest idols, how does this profit margin... I also don't know, the reporting average profit margin being 40%. I don't know if that's gross profit margin or operating profit margin. It's probably gross profit margin, which would mean that JYPE had sort of beaten that, at least again, as of 2013. That's just some number crunchy, interesting facts, but not much to really, I think, report on, just some interesting context. So based on all of that, there are parts of K-pop that are very clearly reality television, right? Survival shows are the main fundamental one. Like, we call them survival shows, but they're a reality television competition, but with usually children. So that's a thing. But they have all the hallmarks of standard competition reality television, except in the case of K-pop and J-pop, the participants have spent years preparing for the reality TV program, which, we might see in other talent-based shows as well, but like for this very specific reality TV program, right? And again, it's children. The other clearly reality television parts are groups who do like small group content, like Skiz Code, where the idols are put into a situation, which is set up like a game, an activity, or something that's just a day in the life vlog style situation. And then the content is shot as it's happening and then edited. So Skiz Code is another example of easily defined reality television. Obviously, they're not hiring new people every time, but there's plenty of reality TV that, you follow them. If you're watching a season of reality TV, you're following these people throughout multiple episodes. Skiz Code is just its own reality TV program that doesn't really end. We just don't have an end date for it, but it is its own. Yeah, it's its own. It's not television. It's not syndicated, but it's reality TV. I got cut off without knowing it in the middle of a sentence by Audacity, which is very rude of it. However, it did give me enough time to make myself more tea and also nachos. So now you get to hear a pleasant crunch. I just ran up and down a whole bunch of stairs. Okay. If half of their content is this precast, ongoing reality television show, and then a bunch of it is staged and music content, but then everything else is like vlogs and Bubble and TikToks and lives and Instagram and interviews. These are all things that are facsimiles of their real lives, that are meant to replicate the idea of their real lives. Even interviews. There's a reason why a lot of interviews are with many of the members, and that's because that facilitates the belief that we're looking at their real lives. Which, of course, like, it is their real life in that this is their job, and they also do their job a lot more than most of us do our jobs. But that this is their personal lives. And even interviews that are like smaller groups or are individual interviews, so often they're being asked about other members and their relationships and what they carry with them to the airport, right? Things that are meant to make you believe that you are learning personal information about them. So if that's what all of their content is this facsimile of real life, then isn't all of it reality TV? Or reality entertainment, I suppose? All of these things are also things that their managers are going to have some kind of hand in, no? We don't know how much of a hand they have in those things, but we never really know with reality TV either. And managers are really just the equivalent of a reality TV show producer. And reality TV is heavily produced, often not ethically, not in what we would call a pro-social manner, neither ethically nor morally. We don't know everything about every reality TV show and how it's produced. We do know that there are major moral and ethical concerns. Some of this we know just based on the sheer number of sexual abuse and sexual assault allegations that come out from reality TV shows. Some of this we know based on various lawsuits or complaints from cast. Most recently, we have the Love is Blind fiasco, and how the recent season of Love is Blind, which I haven't seen, but my understanding is that they spent a lot of time showing how much they're feeding to the cast, because it is a commonly known trick of basically starving a cast, plying them with alcohol, and then, letting the drama occur from there. This is also, of course, this is why I don't give a shit about a company's operating profit margin, because the operating profit margin, that is the profit margin after everything except like taxes and interest. I think that's the only thing that's remaining in the operating profit margin. So all wages have been paid, all building expenses have been paid, right? Like everything else has been paid. I believe the JYP's Q3, their operating profit margin was 30%. Now, ostensibly, an operating profit margin is sort of like your rainy day fund. Like it's you need to spin up something new, or you dip into the negative at some point and you need to like cover it with something. That's supposedly the reason why you try to have a decently strong operating profit margin. But it's just often with these bigger companies, it's just money that just sits there. It goes into a bank account. It accrues, whatever. It eventually probably goes back into the C-suite's bonus, right? I don't know how much you can get away with a whole bunch of money in bonuses in Southern Korea, but like an operating profit margin is just all of the money that doesn't get used to pay people more. So it's good to have, a strong margin, but a 30% margin is just that, whatever. This is like it's a whole different fucking rant. But when we're talking about the way that we're ethically or unethically like treating the people in the company and treating the people who are generating the money, like, yeah, if you're starving your crew, you're going to spend less money on operating costs. Now, if you're just feeding them alcohol, you're going to spend a little bit more money, but not if it's cheap alcohol. If you're giving them bad accommodations, if you're, say, giving them accommodations that they have to pay you back for. So that money doesn't actually hit your profit because eventually they pay you back anyway. We're going to move on because I'm just getting pissed off about this tangent. We also know some of the failings of reality TV show production from some of the people who did these terrible things. So if you have heard of the show Unreal, I think it has like 3 or 4 seasons. I think I only watched a couple of them, but it was quite good. It's very entertaining. A lot of terrible people, which is the point. The show Unreal was made by a woman named Sarah Gertrude Shapiro and a number of other people, obviously. It was based on her short film, Sequin Rays. Now, Shapiro was a producer on The Bachelor for about 4 years. She made Unreal and Sequin Rays partially as an outlet for both the trauma she endured and the terrible things she had done. She has an excellent interview with The New Yorker that I recommend looking up and reading, but I'm going to read just a couple passages from it because I think that that's frankly the easiest way to get through the banality of the evil, right? I could make a list, but truly, I don't think a list can cover it. I don't think a list gets to the emotional resonance the same way the article does. So I'm just going to read straight from it. The first passage is from the first paragraph. Her task, as she recalls it, was to get the contestants to open up and to give them terrible advice and to deprive them of sleep. She sees it now as complicated manipulation through friendship. To ensure that intense emotions were captured on camera, she sometimes misled contestants who were about to be rejected. The night they were going to get dumped, I would go to the hotel room where they were staying and say, I'm going to lose my job for telling you this, but he's going to pick you. He's going to propose. After the contestant left the set, disconsolate, Shapiro joined her in a limousine while the stereo played a song that the contestant had been primed to see as, quote-unquote, their song for their love story with The Bachelor. Shapiro kept jalapenos or lemons hidden in her jacket pocket. Dabbing something acidic in her eye allowed her to cry on cue, which helped elicit tears from the contestant. I'd have arranged with the driver to have the song play just until I got a shot of her crying, then cut the music so I could start the interview, Shapiro explained. They'd often tell us to drive up and down the 405 until the girls cried, and not to come home if we didn't get tears because we'd be fired. In hindsight, Shapiro said being fired would have been a great solution to my problems. Another passage reads, The show lived off the intensity of the contestants' feelings, and to help the women focus on how much they wanted to be with The Bachelor, the producers took away their phones and other links to the outside world. Levinson called it the Bachelor bubble. Shapiro had to help maintain the bubble. The ambitions and the frustrations of the contestants flowed freely, fueled by the alcohol, and Shapiro found a dysfunctional home. She was oddly energized by the sordidness of her task. Haley Goggin-Avila, another producer, says, "It became a sport for her. She wanted those merit badges." Shapiro was a feminist sadist, punishing her unenlightened sisters. The junior producers were trapped in their own bubble, working nonstop, their private lives erased. Senior staff played favorites. Goggin-Avila recalls Levinson's handing $100 bills to whichever producer got her girl to cry first. Levinson had a collection of Prada bags and gave them to producers whose work pleased her. "She was better at manipulating us than we were at manipulating the contestants," Shapiro says. The competition among producers was Hobbesian. If your girls got cut, you got cut. And finally, Shapiro talks about a contestant who she was told to get cry. "She wouldn't give me anything," Shapiro remembers. Her bosses were irritated and the crew was going into overtime, but Shapiro says she just couldn't get her to crack. At 4 a.m., Shapiro got nasty. I asked her, "Do you think he dumped you because you're fat?" I knew she had food issues. The woman began crying and hyperventilating. I made the cameras follow her to a minivan that was waiting to take her to the airport. The next day, the contestant called Shapiro and accused her of ruining her life. Shapiro says, "I realized what I had just done and looked at myself. And I just thought, oh my God, I'm a monster." I watched a Josh Johnson clip recently, one of his routines. It was about the Healthcare United CEO. And he says in it that some jobs make you a monster. And some jobs you need to be a monster to do. Based on what we know, reality TV seems to be a little bit of all of the above. And we have no reason to believe that the reality TV of K-pop is somehow better. There are different laws, different things you can and can't do, but the banality of evil is always banal. People find ways. And while we can know that Stray Kids just renegotiated their contract, we can know that they, have half a division, if not more, to themselves. That is not where they've always been. The contract renegotiation. The contract isn't going to say, you're not allowed to subtly manipulate us by making comments about our bodies to us. It's not going to say, you're not allowed to ask us, are you sure you want to eat all that right now? It's not going to say that you're not allowed to film certain content before we eat so that we're hungry. It's not going to say you're not allowed to ask out of the goodness of your heart, well, if you're feeling that down, do you need to take a short hiatus? And if you think that doesn't happen, you've never outed yourself as having a disability or mental health issue at work, or you haven't worked in very many places, and where you did was quite kind. every time I've brought up a chronic illness at a corporation before my current job, I have been asked if I want to take FMLA leave. And, one of those times it was HR who asked me that, and where I had disclosed that I was dealing with a chronic illness was not at work. It was on LinkedIn. And they were informed that they had been passed along my LinkedIn article. Now, it is possible that things like that are truly out of the goodness of someone's heart. But just as often, they're also meant to be threats. And Stray Kids, just as most K-pop stars and J-pop stars, that they started this as minors. I said before that reality TV works based on uninformed consent. You're not going to be informed of the ways that you will be manipulated. You're not going to be informed of the ways that you will be edited. You're not going to be informed of whether their idea of your storyline is going to fake you out to be... because they fake all kinds of things in reality TV. The well-known sort of, even beyond the emotional manipulation, not just how you edit things, not just what music you play. The music is a huge factor. The way that you incorporate Foley, the sound editing and sound design. But even like what's called a Frankenbite. So you mash together multiple things that a person has said to make a totally new sentence. Or you take a clip of a confessional that was given in a different context and put it into a whole new context. You can create entire falsehoods. You can create entire personas that these people entire characters that are fake, right? That they're not playing who they really are. They think they are. You're using their name and likeness. But the person on the show is not the person that person is. I don't know how far K-pop goes into that. Especially for new groups. I have no idea. I think probably most people have no idea. But this is an important thing to be considering. And, probably for successful groups, there's a lot more of their own input. I said on Threads the other day, I said that if I put as much work in to make people believe that I was making out with my best friend as Lino and Han put into making people believe that they're making out, and just very suddenly our entire fandom, which we have in this circumstance, I suppose, was like, oh, we've realized it's disrespectful to ship our idols, so we're not going to do that anymore. I would make out with said best friend topless at a pride parade out of fucking spite. I'd be so pissed off, personally. Because, again, regardless of what any of their personal relationships are, they know the storylines, y'all. They know these things. And maybe some of the storylines they're playing into because they're true, and maybe some of the storylines they're playing into because they're running a reality entertainment media art piece that never ends. We don't know. And we don't know because when they're going to be younger, right? Like, as you grow up, you get older, you better understand what's happening in the world around you. You have more resources. You make friends with other idols who sort of tell you how the industry works. You're able to have more control over your fate. But when you're younger, and again, it is not informed consent. Nobody is sitting down with the 17-year-old, the 16-year-old, and saying, Yeah, so what we've found is that because we live in a highly repressed society, if you like skinship, we're going to really emphasize that. And we would love to see who the fans end up pairing you with. Not to the 16-year-old. Maybe to the 20-year-old. But you're not going to tell the 16-year-old, what you're going to encourage. You're not going to tell the 16-year-old, like, it doesn't matter what you do, there will be 25-year-olds sexualizing you. You're not going to tell the 16-year-old who you want to make money off of that if they show you their stress and their anxiety, you're going to find ways to use it for profit. You're not going to tell them that. And they're not going to know that because they're 16. They're not going to know if you're depressed and feel like killing yourself while you're still living with your band members. You will probably manage to pull through. But as you get older and you start doing more solo work and you start living separately and you don't have constant community support, you're going to be more at risk. You're not going to tell them that they will never be able to show a neutral face without being asked if they're okay. You're not going to tell them these things. Why do we debut minors? Well, the answer is uninformed consent. There's a longer answer, of course. There is an actual reason why. This is going to get rough, FYI. I'm not going to go deeply into Johnny's associates, but it's super triggering. So we got to start with JPOP, actually. Now, of course, it's not to say that Western media doesn't also do essentially the equivalent of debuting minors. That's what the Disney kid thing is, right? That's what the Nickelodeon kid thing was. And unfortunately, the answer to why did they, quote unquote, debut minors is the same. Is because they were minors, is because they're an easily exploitable group. And we know how that went for Nickelodeon, at least. Right? We know the incredibly rampant abuse that happened at Nickelodeon. So, with that being the case, why would we do this? Why would we do this to children? So, Johnny and Associates. Johnny and Associates was the primary J-pop talent agency. It was formed in the 60s and starting debuting male idols primarily at that same time in the 60s and 70s. Now, it didn't become big, I think, until like the 80s or 90s. But it was doing this process, and it's the same process of training groups of young boys and debuting them as artists. Back in 2020, Matsumoto Jun of Arashi, which was one of the bands I was really into when I was into J-pop when I was a teenager, said, Johnny created so many boy bands in his 60 years of working and left an indelible mark, not just on the entertainment industry of Japan, but also on Asian pop culture overall, even outside of Japan, visible in the rise of Asian pop generation. What you're currently seeing now with non-Japanese groups as well all really found its roots in the foundational work that Johnny did back in the 60s. This is super true. So, they do it because it was really, really successful for Johnny and Associates. And the big reason why you don't know about it is because of Japan's, Johnny's itself was super, super, super strict about music distribution. And Japan itself is really strict about copyright. But this is not actually the reason why we debut minors. Because the reason we debut minors is the reason that he debuted minors, which was his rampant sexual abuse of young people, and especially of adolescent boys. So Johnny Kitagawa died in 2019, and it was really, really pinned up tight because of his influence. But in 2023, a report was released that showed that he committed sexual abuse all the way from the 70s to almost up until he died against hundreds of boys. Reported of almost 500 people were claimed to have been victimized by him. So why do we debut minors? Because Johnny Kitagawa wanted to have sex with teenagers. That's why. And we know how ripe these environments are for abuse. And it really does just go to show that, like, people who think that, like, oh, there's a uniquely American problem. No, it's just that we know more about the American problems for a variety of reasons. We know that there are massive problems that we are unaware of with sexual abuse in K-pop and all kinds of abuse. We know this because Burning Sun was a thing. We also know this because of, what we know, that K-drama idols have talked about the ways they were abused, some of whom talked about those things shortly before killing themselves. And we know that where there's minors, there's people who are manipulating them. We know this super, super clearly now because of VCHA. God, this fucking sucks. I'm gonna eat some more nachos. They're like cold now, but I don't care. They're still chips with cheese. This episode is so not fun. That's why it's taken me so long to do. This episode sucks. I'm gonna do fun episodes soon. Episodes I like doing. This one's ass. It's just ruining everyone's fun, including my own. I hope our birds are eating something yummy, like nachos. Probably not allowed to eat nachos. I'm sure they're allowed to eat nachos. I don't know. If I renewed my contract and I made as much fucking money for a company as they did, my contract would be, you are never allowed to tell me what to eat, ever. Fuck you. That would be my contract. Y'all ever think about how DPR Ian is someone Shan really, really likes, and DPR Ian was like, hey, I fucking hate the way K-pop works. I'm gonna make my own company. Never go like, it'd be cool if Chan used his time not going to the military to instead go independent. They probably won't do that. They're taken care of pretty well by JYPE at this point. Plus, have a strong feeling that if you're treated semi-decently, there's a lot of comparison to the worst that people get treated in a place like the K-pop industry. That probably a lot of people don't realize how terribly traumatized they were until later. I really don't want to talk about VCHA until I'm eating like half my nachos. I haven't even written this part of the script. Makes me too sad. Yeah, I went off script like, I don't know, about half an hour ago. Okay. VCHA. So as you've probably heard, KG from VCHA dropped a lawsuit against JYPE USA, which is the division that runs VCHA. And I suspect that I don't know that that division's going to last very long with this lawsuit. So dropped a lawsuit. It is a massive lawsuit. It is like over 70 pages long. I haven't read the whole thing. Detailing the absolutely horrific abuse and exploitation that she underwent as a minor. Southern Korea has some pretty strong adult labor laws. I mean, not like mind-blowing. But, you know, adequate. Its child labor laws are not good. They're pretty subpar. California has the strongest child labor laws in the United States, I'm pretty sure. And you read through that lawsuit, and if you know anything about labor laws in the United States, it's like these people didn't even fucking glance at it. Because the thing is that like almost all of these things that JYPE USA or JYP USA, it's not JYPE USA, it's just JYP USA, it's weird, is being accused of is like pretty easy to prove, actually. And they would not have put it there if they didn't have like documentation to support it. I would not be surprised, especially if any of the other girls put down another lawsuit, like this becomes a $10 million lawsuit. This is easily in the millions of dollars for what they did to her. Not to mention any fines that they have to end up paying to the state of California, et cetera, and so forth. If this ends up costing them $8 million, all things said and done, just like based on what their profit margins have been, like JYP overall, I don't see them choosing to maintain JYP USA. I know a lot of people have this desperate hope that the lawsuit that KG put down is somehow unique. Or that, again, this is an American problem. We have no reason to believe that. We just don't. I'm sorry. We don't have any reason to believe that. We have plenty of reason to believe the inverse. We know that there are really harsh things that they are made to do, like other K-pop idols have said that. We know that, you know, K-pop idols who have left have talked about being starved and starving themselves. DPR Ian even has talked a little bit about some of the ways that you get punished I think the interview I saw him bring this up in, he brought up, if you get there at 5 a.m., you get home at 1 or 2 a.m., and you do that over and over. And if you're even a minute late, you sit on your knees in the corner. And like, that's just horrific to me. Like that's abuse. That's sleep torture. That's sleep abuse. Teenagers need the most amount of sleep of pretty much anyone except infants. Teenagers need 10 to 12 hours of sleep. So again, we go back to reality TV and how it sleep deprives people. Sleep deprived. I'm going to start crying. Sleep deprived people, especially sleep deprived young people, don't have the cognitive reasoning to advocate for themselves. People who don't have enough food don't have the cognitive reasoning. They don't even, I don't know if you've ever known somebody with, or, had experienced yourself like a significant eating disorder and been undernourished, or seen someone deeply chronically undernourished. They're not even the same people that they are when they're eating properly. And so teenagers who are striving towards something they're passionate about, people who are striving towards something they're passionate about, but especially young people who don't have experience in other things and who are put into a situation where they're given community, even if they're repeatedly ripped away from it, but they're given community, and then stripped of the ability to make sound decisions, which they can't even do in the first place because they're 16, 17. Yeah. They're probably going to do whatever the fuck you tell them to do. And this is something that KG and her lawyer talks about, is how, they were told by management to cover up another member's suicide attempt to the person who was in charge, like the child welfare person, and lie and say that they were in the hospital because of food poisoning. That the reason that KG opened the lawsuit was because her mother pushed her to. I'm not going to get into the details of that lawsuit. It's really beyond horrific. And I'm clearly already emotional. And like I said, I've already gone way off script. I didn't have a script for this. But we do... One of the things that was said in that lawsuit was, Korea was bad, but so is this. About the way that they were treated. I think we have a lot of reason to believe now that stray kids are being treated better. And I know that Chan has repeatedly said, don't go after the company doesn't make us do anything, whatever. And fuck, maybe that's true. But maybe he also had been in that company since he was 13. Because I simply, based on all of the context, again, the meta-analysis, have a really hard time believing that JYPE somehow is the one company that's not exploiting children, that's not exploiting young people. I have a really hard time believing that. And like, even if they're not just children, like, fuck, I didn't know what the fuck I was doing when I was 21. I could start to give informed consent with the right research, with the right resources. I could at least, be aware enough of the situation to know if I was signing a bad deal. But I didn't know what the fuck I was doing when I was 21. And yeah, considering that JYPE US or JYP USA is part of JYPE, and yes, I know that like they're going to be run differently from the other divisions, and it is perfectly possible. You know, I have worked on the Black Sheep teams before, the teams that like this team is treated way worse than any other team in the company. But there's still a level of worse, you know? And yeah, we can cross our fingers that this one, because they're abroad, you know, whatever, was way worse. But that doesn't lead me to believe that the rest of it is good. And it doesn't lead me to believe that we have good reason to believe what we're seeing is anything other than a facsimile. I think we see moments of true personality. I think that, you know, there's only so much that you can hide different things from fans. I think that Stray Kids really authentically wants to connect with fans, and I think that's very clear with like who they personally are. And I suspect that now that they are older, a lot of what we're getting is more authentic. I suspect, for instance, that, you know, a lot of people have been like, is Felix okay? Relatively. I see some comment about like, is Felix doing okay on Threads, like fucking every other day. And I look at these pictures of him not doing okay, or these interviews of quote unquote not doing okay. And I have to sit there and I have to wonder, like, maybe he's just not bullshitting us all the time anymore. Maybe he was kind of bullshitting us for a few years. Like, yeah, maybe he grew up, but maybe also he knew that fans really liked seeing him be the quote unquote sunshine, and he knew that fans liked seeing him be super cuddly and super outgoing, and he really leaned into that, or management really leaned into that, or editing really leaned into that, or who the fuck knows really leaned into that. And now has a new contract and is older, and also is one of the 2 top selling, you know, groups of JYPE, making them half their goddamn money. And he was like, no, I'm not gonna fucking smile at the airport anymore. Go away. Right? You know, it's people who look at all the videos of Han and are like, I don't think he's really an introvert or whatever. And of course, clinically, I have many qualms with an introversion and extroversion as labels, especially as relating to the fucking MBTI. I'm gonna have to do an entire episode just bitching about the MBTI, aren't I? Oh God. Yeah, no, that I've said it. I'm definitely going to. That's 100% going to happen. But people who are like, he doesn't seem like an introvert. It's like, okay, but what you see is what, like, nobody's editing. You think they actually film like 30 minutes of content when they film SKZ Code? They're filming hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of content. They're filming so much content. Even, you know, the 2 kids room, the 1 kid's room, like, they're filming way more content than what we're seeing. We get an edited version of whatever persona they're putting on at any point in time. We get edits of Han based on what whomever is in charge of making these decisions thinks fans are going to enjoy the most. Okay, I've been recording for almost 2 hours. So I think that's it. I've given you the overview of what our concept of the state of the meta is, and we've talked a little bit about reality television, which was very depressing. So sorry. I'm going to tell you what content is upcoming from me. So I've been, like, this is partially my fault, and then I was peer pressured into it. I did not expect it to get so popular of a theme. Vaguely peer pressured to do therapist reactions to the solo music videos, because I have a lot of thoughts and feelings on Railway, Unfair, and Someone Hallucination. My next 2 episodes here are going to be a lot more fun for me. I've been really looking forward to them. It's going to be a 2-parter. One is a state of the meta overview, and one is a theme on strangeness and aliens. So the state of the meta overview is going to be on neurodivergence and expectations of neurotypicality within non-neurotypical idols. And then one of the episodes is going to be on the actual, like, Stray Kids kind of storyline and theme around their own strangeness. We're going to talk a little bit about, Alien and Human and Hold My Hand in those. And then with those, I want to do one of said YouTube Therapist Reacts videos, because I know I keep saying I'm not a music analysis podcast, so I guess I'm doing it on YouTube instead. I want to do a companion piece to just the Hold My Hand video, because that's its whole own. I think Railway is going to be its own thing because I have a lot to say about dissociation, and I think Hold My Hand is going to be its own thing. And then maybe I'll throw the others together. I haven't figured out exactly how it's going to go, but I've got solo MV stuff being prepped for on YouTube, and then the next 2 episodes of this will probably not involve me crying, so that'll be positive outcome for me. Stay. My throat hurts so much, as you can probably tell. I've drunk so much tea. Stay, thank you for listening to what will probably end up being about an hour and 20 minutes of me talking about first a bunch of stuff that's irrelevant to K-pop and then a bunch of really depressing stuff. I hope that despite the content, it was interesting and useful. Oh God, I'm not in a headspace for a bad pun on social path. I hope you socially pave your way to my Threads account. Or I don't. No, that we're just gonna keep that. We're gonna keep socially paving your way to my Threads account. Yeah, you can find me on Threads. You can find me on YouTube. I'm gonna go through the effort of trying to put these podcast episodes with like some generic background on YouTube as well. And I will be doing those solo reaction videos. I had thought about doing it tonight, but it's almost 8 now, so we're not going to do it tonight, but soon. Both of those you can find under Metaskis Verse. And if you'd like to throw a couple bucks my way because you enjoy the work I do, you can also find my Ko-Fi. Same place. It'll all be in my card that is linked in the episode description. Yeah. So go socially pave your way to my card account, or to, I don't know, something fun. Something more fun than this episode has been. Go socially pave your way to something more fun than this episode is. Love you, stay. Bye.